Good morning. It's another time for us to bring you analysis and perspectives, and this is the Daybreak show on Trust Television, reaching you from the nation's capital. I am Ayuba Ila. Thanks for joining.
Hello, good morning and welcome to Daybreak on Trust TV. It is a beautiful Wednesday morning and I am Ibrahim Yusuf.
Beginning with the headlines this morning, Tinubu condoles with emirs of Kano, Bichi over demise of family matriarch.
And 2023, our people will work against you, Akpabio's local government chairman dares him.
Peter Obi attacked in Katsina.
And now the details. The All Progressives Congress presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu has condoled the Emir of Kano, Amina Ado Bayero, and Emir of Bichi, Nasir Ado Bayero, over the recent demise of the family matriarch Fulani Asia Bayero. Hajia Fulani Hasia died on Tuesday, January 17, 2023. In a statement on Tuesday, Abdulaziz, Special Assistant to the presidential candidate on media and publicity, said Fulani Hasia was a pious and affectionate woman who played critical roles in maintaining and sustaining the royal family ties. The APC candidate said Fulani will be greatly missed not only by family members and her relations, but by all who encountered her.
All right, now the chairman of the Asian Udim local government area of Akwa Ibom State, Mr. Anthony Luke, has said that Senator Godswill Akpabio will lose the senatorial election. The Supreme Court recently affirmed Akpabio as the rightful candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District under the All Progressives Congress and not retired DIG Udom Ekpo Udom. Now, Akpabio, who hails from Asian Udim, was the former Senate Minority Leader and Niger Delta Minister before he resigned to contest a presidential candidate. Luke claimed that apart from Akpabio's own community of Okana, he has done nothing in other communities in Asian Udim to deserve the votes of the people in the forthcoming elections. Luke said that he and his people will remain grateful and committed to the People's Democratic Party because it was through the party that an Asian Udim son rose to an enviable position as governor and as minority leader.
Meanwhile, presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, has narrated how his campaign team was attacked in Katsina State. Obi's team, that has been on a state-to-state tour, touched down in Katsina on Monday. Daily Trust had reported how the presidential candidate wooed voters and promised to tackle insecurity if elected. In a statement issued on his behalf, Diron Onifade, head of media, Obi Deputy Presidential Campaign Council, said the attack on Obi and his campaign team is condemnable. According to him, the two incidents taken together make the team to suspect that the attacks may have been premeditated at the behest of desperate politicians who had been deluding themselves with the false claim that they had the Northwest in their pockets, but are now shocked by the show of force of the obedient movement in the region. While commending the people of Katsina who came out en masse to support their campaign on Monday, he urged security agencies to investigate the attacks to forestall future occurrences.
All right, now to some of the packages that we have this morning. The Central Bank of Nigeria says the January 31st deadline for old Naira notes remains. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee meeting also raised the interest rates by 100 basis points, taking it from 16.5% to 17.5%. The committee announced on Tuesday that the MPC cash reserve ratio was retained at 32.5%, while liquidity ratio remained 30%. Take a look.
The first MPC meeting for 2023 had been highly anticipated, as many have been curious to see what move the CBN's MPC will make. Governor of the Apex Bank insists deadline for the withdrawal of old 1,500 and 200 Naira notes from circulation remains, despite calls from different quarters requesting for an extension.
I must say here that unfortunately I don't have good news for those who feel that we should shift the deadline. My apologies. The reason is because, just like the president had said on more than 2 occasions, and even to people privately, that for us, 90 days, in fact, we feel is 100 days is enough for anybody who has money or the old currency to deposit the money in the banks. And we took every measure to ensure that all the banks were open or remain still open to receive all old currencies.
The NPC meeting announced that the benchmark interest rate will be hiked by 100 basis points, taking it from 16.5% to 17.5%. CBN governor explains that the decision is in a bid to aggressively fight inflation. The decision to hike the interest rate comes despite a slight decrease in inflationary pressures, which he says is not enough to celebrate.
The economy remained confronted with the risk of high inflation with adverse consequences on the general standard of living. Committee therefore decided to sustain the current stance of policy at this point in time to further rein in inflation aggressively. In summary, MPC voted to 1. Raise MPR to 17.5%, 2. Retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the corridor, and 3. Retain the CRR at 2.5%, and 4. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Several experts as well as international financial institutions have warned against developing nations using monetary tightenings to fight inflation, as it may further complicate life for its citizens. Chamun Dabeng, Trust TV News, Abuja.
And still talking monetary policy, daily cash withdrawals at automated teller machines in Yola Metropolis have been reduced to 20,000 naira daily. Residents there are lamenting that the development is already causing untold hardship as financial transactions have been greatly affected. Salis Lawan brings us up to speed on the latest developments.
Reduction of cash withdrawals at automated teller machines by the Central Bank of Nigeria to 20,000 naira daily is now a reality. Bank customers trooped to their various service points to access cash, but unfortunately, they could only access 20,000 naira for the day. Some residents who spoke to Trust TV described the development as disturbing.
Really is affected, especially the rural community is affected drastically. Because yesterday, my wife, she's a businesswoman, she went to Barking Sajo, Murki, to go and buy something with all currency. They rejected it, and some people carry their goods and go back home with it. That means that this has affected the business of this, especially our state, Adamawa State, drastically.
It's really disappointing, and it had hurting it, because most of the kiosks you see now, you want to make any purchase, most of them reject old notes. You come to the ATM machine for the purpose of withdrawal, and the daily limit is 20,000. How much is a bag of rice now? You don't expect me to go and buy a bag of rice for 20,000. So you see, the stress is just too much. And even in the counter, here's my check. I want to withdraw, and they were trying to give me an old note. Who is going to accept the old note? So I'm pleading with the Apex Bank. There is need for an extension.
Some business centers have placed notifications alerting customers that they will stop collecting all naira notes from Wednesday, 25th January. Fortunately, the Adamawa state government has paid January salaries, but the question is how useful is the money when it is not readily accessible. Banking halls are overpopulated with customers returning old naira notes. More worrisome is the fact that the new naira notes are not available even when withdrawals are made over the counter. At the time of filing this report, most ATM points are running low on cash, which is hardly enough to go round, and whether or not CBN will yield to the appeals of many Nigerians to extend the deadline for collection of the old notes remains to be seen. From Yola, Salis Lawan, Trust TV News.
All right, now, physically challenged persons, especially in communities where most residents are low-income earners, are running the harsh economic reality of the present-day Nigeria. Now, Katsina is one of the such states where most of its inhabitants are people living below the United Nations poverty line. Abdullahi Amadi takes a look at the lives of some physically challenged persons and how they struggle to make ends meet.
Tukur Lurwanu, a professional shoemaker and an NCE holder from Federal College of Education, Katsina, says most of their members are in abject poverty. Though Tukur admitted that a greater percentage of physically challenged persons in Katsina have received trainings on various skills, he says many are out of business because of high cost of materials. This, among many other factors, were attributed to the rampant collapse of businesses, including those of physically challenged persons who are worst affected. At the height of all these challenges, men of the underworld greeted Tukur's kiosk and stole his work tools.
Under my control, the people that are behind me in making shoes, those are physically challenged. I have at least 10 physically challenged people. But as you see me here, nobody is behind me, left and right, back and front. Why? Because of the expenses of life and the changes of life.
These physically challenged persons who are engaged in various businesses and handicrafts were forced to close down due to the high cost of materials and lack of capital. The effect of all this is that each of the physically challenged persons has at least 10 to 15 people under them, either learning the trade or supporting it. However, with the collapse of the business, their fate hangs in the balance. Before now, I was into tea and bread business, and I was doing very well. But unfortunately, after the coronavirus pandemic, coupled with the surging cost of materials, I was forced out of the business. I had about 4 people working under me, but right now I'm struggling to feed myself.
I
had a capital of close to 500,000 naira. Due to inflation, I am now in packaged water business. All I had went down the drain. But we thank God all the same. In spite of all this, there are still some physically challenged persons who are comfortable in their businesses but not without challenges.
To, kasuwa ana yi kuma ana samun ci gaba bakin gwalgwadon iko.
For us, we are still able to get a little that can take care of our daily needs from this business. We can feed ourselves, pay school fees, service our tricycles, and assist others where necessary. However, we need more empowerment and better patronage.
Kayan aiki. Sune sun yi tsada.
The physically challenged persons in Katsina are positive that their problems would drastically reduce if the government establishes a commission that will take care of them. Similarly, the appeals to northern leaders to champion a cause that will empower their members and help reduce street begging and other vices. Abdullahi Ismail, Trust Television News, Katsina.
Now to health matters, where 30 people are feared dead following an outbreak of diphtheria in Kano State. Trust TV correspondent Idris Ibrahim reports that affected victims are still mourning the death of their loved ones, while several others are still in the hospital. His report.
Sanusi Shaibu in Ungogoloku government area of Kano State is mourning the death of his son 2 days after he's been infected. He says one other is currently in the hospital receiving treatment.
He started with a fever. I then took him to pharmacist. They gave him some drugs. Later we came back home and the fever still continued. So I took him to the hospital. After I went to the hospital, they advised me that I should take it to another hospital where they normally treat people with such kind of disease. So the very day I took him to that particular hospital, it was the day he died.
According to residents of this area, several other people have lost their lives in the last few days, and it appears the outbreak is spreading further despite efforts to contain it.
She started from being very lazy, later on with a fever. Then I took her to the hospital. They gave her some drugs. We came back, but we couldn't go back to the hospital because she could not eat. Blood started coming out from her mouth, and later she died. He woke up with a swollen neck, and then after I saw that, I took him to the hospital. They gave him some drugs, and then we came back home. We thought it was just a normal disease that we used to see in Hausaland. So we keep on doing traditional medicine up to the time he died. Then people started telling us that it was a different kind of disease called diphtheria.
Experts say children are more vulnerable to diphtheria, but even adults who have not been properly vaccinated are also at risk of being infected.
Staying in an overcrowded location with people coughing, one is putting him or herself at risk. And the second thing is the issue of sanitation. Coming into contact with someone or maybe an object that has a deposit of the diphtheria bacterium, without proper sanitation, hand hygiene, one will also be at risk. So, and then with the weather now, the season, you know, it's a very cold time. And then with that, people come down with a lot of flu. So the thing is, people shouldn't take it for granted.
At the moment, doctors say over 100 people have so far been infected in Kano, and that the number of death toll may likely increase in the next coming days. Idris Jubrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
All right, now internally displaced persons in Maiduguri have lamented the non-completion of their PVCs and lack of means of transportation to travel to their local government areas for voting during the 2023 elections. Mona IDP camp is the only camp yet to be shut down after the state government declared all camps closed. Beatrice Gurutzi has details.
Since the closure of all IDP camps in Maiduguri, Muna al-Barnawi camp remains open till this day. As the elections draw nearer and collection of PVCs still ongoing, Trust TV found out that not all IDPs have collected their PVCs. According to them, they will be voting at their local governments and not in the capital city of Maiduguri. Ahmed Chigwal says he and his family will cast their ballot on the election day despite lingering fears and security threats in some parts of Mafa local government. He said those who are yet to have theirs were told to get them at their local government councils. Some of us are afraid of going back home to vote. Like recently, some farmers were kidnapped, but I'm still going to vote because we know the polling unit will be safe. They will be provided with security. We were told that we will be voting in our local government, and so we should go to pick our PVCs there. But they are supposed to finish the PVC distribution here. Then we can go and vote in our communities. You have to transport yourself to your local government to get the PVC, and some of us don't have money to do that. Government should make it easier for us to get the PVC. With the 2023 elections expected to usher in a new government, they have list of expectations. I want the government to resettle us because the children are not supportive. They only play and learn nothing. Even the farming we do, they don't know how to do it. So until we are in our hometown, they will become more productive.
We will want the government to build schools, build hospitals, create jobs for us, and most especially provide farmers with implements and seedlings.
The 2023 elections, which will see resettled IDPs in their communities participating at the polls after 13 years of insurgency, will be a confirmation that the worst of terrorism in the area has come and gone.
And as Nigeria joins the global community to commemorate the 2023 International Day for Education, the need to tackle the rising number of out-of-school children has again been stressed as it threatens the development of the nation. According to experts and development partners, this can be mitigated by implementing policies that improve the livelihoods of families, provide better access to quality education, collaboration with non-state actors, and increase budgetary allocations in the education sector.
Nigeria, according to statistics, holds the third highest number of out-of-school children among primary school, adolescents and young people in secondary schools. The number of those deprived of education is 19.7 million, according to the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization 2020 model estimates. Educational opportunities are lacking in many parts of the country due to poverty, insecurity, unending strikes, among others. Stakeholders say investing in people is a way of prioritizing education as it remains a critical tool for human capital development and the economic growth of the country.
Non-state actors like us, we've been able to help more than 5,000 children through different initiatives, because we believe that quality education is not only about academics, as people broadcast it out there, but it's also a question of being able to find what the talent of the child is and make them future ready and productive citizens of the world.
We identified 20 beneficiaries which are out of school children within the community, right? And we decided to enroll them into school. So we came here today, we met with the parents of the beneficiaries and we met the beneficiaries as well. We conducted an enrollment assessment for them to enable us to identify the class in which these children fit into, that is within primary 1 to 6, and we did that successfully. We also distributed learning materials to them and we met with the head teacher and paid their registration and tuition fees as well.
Despite programs and strategies deployed by the federal government to address the menace of out-of-school children, the number has continued to rise.
Initiatives like the Open Schooling Initiative by UBEC, the Girl Child Education Initiative, Agile program in many states across the country, funded by the World Bank, so also supported by state governments. But the problem is we want the government to also fund more and fund better, because the current budget speaks to only about 8% of Nigeria's budget, and we are supposed to have at least 15 to 20% marked for education. This is the only thing that is going to solve a lot of the challenges we have.
The government can also work well, together. The more we collaborate, the governmental organizations and private organizations, the more results we will produce, I believe, and the more impact we would have on the society.
To reverse the trend and spur accelerated development, the
All right, now presidential campaign rally of the People's Democratic Party in Delta State recorded a large turnout of the party supporters at the Stephen Keshi Stadium in Asaba, the state capital. PDP candidate Atiku Abubakar told the crowd that he is in the state to thank the people, not to campaign, as they have been faithful to the party since 1999. National chairman of the party, Yocha Ayu, Sokoto State Governor Aminu Tambuwal and other chieftains of the PDP called on residents to vote for PDP at the forthcoming general elections. The state governor and the party's vice presidential candidate Ifeanyi Okowa expressed gratitude to Atiku for choosing him as a running mate.
We shall not betray the trust of Delta State, and in fact the Niger Delta sub-region altogether. That is why it's my modest contribution to your support over the years I decided to take one of you as my running mate. As you know, a running mate is always a stepping stone. Therefore, it is up to you to give Governor Okowa the massive support that he needs to show the people of this country that you are committed to your own future. I want, therefore, to assure you, you must have read my 5-point agenda. One of those agendas is education. I want to commend this young man who, on behalf of all the students in Niger Delta, have today endorsed our candidature. And in my policy document, as far as education is concerned and the responsibility of the federal government is concerned, I said there shall be no more ASU strike.
Well, that's it for the headlines and reports for this hour on Daybreak. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, the show continues. Stay with us.
As part of efforts to support Africa's goal of strengthening.
Now looking at the activity chart, as you can see right here, a total volume of 130.
Created a Boko Haram crisis that at that time was restricted to Yobe.
How secure are they? You can see security men with blood.
This is the road leading up to the
Already, if you look at English squad, you are looking at EPL, you are looking at their names. You are not looking at.
But in a situation where you find that a look at this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
But I have said that.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust Television. Time to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. We'll begin with the Daily Trust newspaper. This morning, the lead story on the Daily Trust says Buhari chairs 14-man committee as fuel scarcity worsens. It has the rider that says DSS, Customs, EFCC, others are members. President racing against time, says experts. Hawkers sell petrol for 500 naira per litre in Abuja, 600 in Ondo State. You'd find all the details of that story on page 4 and page 6. Now, above the lead story, you have Constitution Review. State Assemblies rejects financial autonomy for local government areas. That's on page 13. New Naira notes, National Assembly and BFLA differ on deadline extension on page 23. Gombe governorship, Court dismisses PDP suit seeking to disqualify Governor Inua Yahaya. Also, you would find PSC orders retiring police officers to go. That's on page 34. CBN debunks 89 trillion naira stamp duty claim, says 370.686 billion naira collected by banks on page 23. Woman quits marriage, marries daughter's boyfriend in Kano. You also would find at a footnote, race to Nas, Buhari senatorial district, Keita, Daura set for epic battle. So these are the major stories on the front page of Daily Trust newspaper.
Next, we'll take a look at This Day newspaper. The major story on the front page reads, MFLA forecloses extension of January 31st deadline for return of old banknotes. And National Assembly members kick. House of Representatives sets up committee to meet CBN, bank CEOs on redesigned currencies. Apex Bank governor says about 1.5 trillion naira of old banknotes returned. Clarifies stamp duty row and reveals 370.68 billion naira collected in 7 years and not 89 trillion. Audit underway. The riders still say declares currency redesign has slowed down kidnapping and ransom taking and says no cause for alarm over CBN's exposure to federal government. MPC raises MPR to 17.5%. Now, that's the major story on the front page of This Day newspaper. Still talking about This Day newspaper, Atiku, I'll change our security architecture, grow economy. Tinubu, I'll end youth frustration in Nigeria if elected. And going towards the top of the front page there, there's an interview there with Najatu Muhammad, which is being promoted inside page 18 and 19. FG moves to end nationwide fuel scarcity, just as we saw on the Daily Trust, sets up 14-man steering committee. Details of that story can be found on page 5. And at the very top of the front page there, Buhari takes train ride after inaugurating phase 1 of Lagos Blue Rail Line, and witnesses signing of contract for construction of second phase unveils J.K. Randall Center for Yoruba Culture. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of This Day newspaper this morning.
All right, now on the Guardian newspaper, the lead story talks about old Naira notes. It says CBN insists on January 31 deadline, shuns calls for extension. You have the riders that says denies scarcity of new notes. Senate urges CBN to soft pedal. Reps seeks review of daily withdrawal limit. Ndume, as a senator, I haven't seen new notes. Learn from UK. Hurua knocks CBN over last-minute cash swap. You also have above the lead story, expect earlier than normal onset of rainfall. Floods in 2023, NIMET warns. Dangote refinery not part of projects for Buhari's commissioning. IPC seeks safety for journalists ahead of 2023 polls. Buhari keeps mum. Commissions Blue Line Rail, J. Randall Center. You also have at the bottom, Buhari appoints Arase as PSC boss amid furor over IGP's tenure elongation. FG reinstates COVID-19 travel protocol. More countries restrict Chinese travelers. These are the major stories on The Guardian this morning.
Next, we'll take a look at the Punch newspaper, and the major story reads, New Naira deadline, Kano, Ondo, Anambra depositors flood banks with old notes. And riders here that says CBN shuns National Assembly, insists January 31st cash swap deadline. EFCC, ICPC won't arrest huge depositors, Emefiele assures bank customers. And central bank officials, POS agents set up rural cash exchange points. Still on the front page of the Punch newspaper, Labour knocks governors and states reject local government autonomy. Islamic teacher bags life in jail for defiling 8 pupils. Details of that story can be found on pages 4 and 5. WHO worries over fresh 170,000 COVID-19 deaths. And towards the top of the front page there, at the very top, FG raises 14-man panel to end fuel scarcity. Interest rate hike, job losses, crisis loom, warns OPS. And traders lament as Okowa shuts markets for Atiku. Now, these are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper this morning.
All right. On the Nation newspaper, the lead story: Senators, reps draw battle line with CBN over Naira notes. You also have above the masthead, retire if you are due. PSC orders DIGs, AIGs. Abia to enjoy export hub status, says Tinubu. You have a tribunal fixes Friday for verdict in Oyetola versus Adeleke. President heads 14-man panel to end petrol crisis. You also have legislature, judiciary autonomy bills ready for Buhari's assent. These are the major stories on the Nation newspaper, which is the final paper that we'll be looking at. We have our reviewer with us in the studio, Ben Sherman, the former Director of News, Voice of Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak, as always.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, the central bank governor doesn't have good news for those who are seeking the extension of the deadline for the phasing out of the old Naira notes. Yesterday he said that. And the National Assembly is taking, an opposite position on this. They are insisting that there should be an extension, otherwise there will be crisis. And one will think that the issue of withdrawal limit have been reversed by the Central Bank of Nigeria, but somehow there seems to be uncertainty about that. I don't know. What's your take on this?
Well, when you say the CBN has bad news, it's not extending the date and all that stuff. You see, the Nigerian, this culture of last-minute rush. Look at voters' cards. People are still, waiting last minute. Please extend. Even when you extend, you still call for extension. My worry, and I think my recommendation, should rather be more deployments to rural areas, take new currencies to rural areas, just extend this en bulk. And we see people complaining that when they go to ATM, what the money comes out, what is being dispensed is old currency. So who is stuffing that with old currency? And so the banks that are doing that should be sanctioned, because it's an attempt to derail this system.
Is it that the central bank is not giving the banks enough new currencies? Or the banks are hoarding the currencies?
I think the banks...
Or what exactly? Is it about racketeering now, or what?
I think the banks are the culprits, because as the name implies, commercial banks. You don't do direct transactions with the CBN at all, you as an individual. So at the dispensing point, it has to be the commercial bank, either at the counter or by way of the ATMs. You have POS, you go there, many of them still have the old currency. And that's why you can see some people are really rejecting it to ensure that why should I collect 100,000? Why should I have 100,000 that I can't spend? So it's therefore a call to the CBN to ensure that points of services, POS or ATM, you have to have new currencies and not people going to get money and you are receiving money that you can't spend. So for Nigerians, truly, this issue of always waiting and waiting shouldn't be. And I think this, the central bank should also bring its hammer very well and harsh on commercial banks that are refusing to do many of these things.
Well, a lot of
those who, just a moment, those who still hoard the old currency, I wonder, you've been told a long time ago, even if you knew it's too much for you, well, if you feel that it's too much, you can, I mean, how did you even get it in the first place? But if you've been depositing it piecemeal, you must have reached somewhere. But if you feel it's still going to be under your pillow, some big pot or some holes in one house or some bunker somewhere, good luck to you. and you might end up feeding cockroaches with that money.
Well, a lot of people actually will argue that it's not a question of people waiting till the last minute to actually do that. A lot of people will say that they tried to get the new currencies, but the unavailability of the currencies was what hindered them getting it at this particular point. Even now, when with the rush that is currently on right now, a lot of people are still complaining that they still don't have access to these new currencies. We just read a headline of a senator actually saying that as a senator he hasn't seen the new notes. I don't know how true that is, but the unavailability is what is being blamed on the current rush right now.
Yes, the unavailability, we're hearing that from customers like you and I. But are the commercial banks complaining? They are not complaining. So which means there is something someone is not doing correctly. So if the CBN as it stands as the bankers' bank and it can bring the sledgehammer on the commercial banks, why not? Do it and do it without fear or favor, because the economy of this country is called to question when things of this nature happen. There should be a limit as to how an authority will say do this, and someone somewhere, some institutions that are weaker, that are subservient, that are lower in nature, would challenge higher authorities, and nobody is called to question or to answer such questions. People must be held accountable for their actions and inactions. If there's an attempt to derail, if there's an attempt to frustrate the process, if there is an attempt to aid or abate this kind of free flow of money, I think it should be questioned thoroughly.
The reps is seeking the review of the daily withdrawal limit set by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and I thought that the Central Bank has already done that.
Yeah, yes. The CBN said it did that, but it's one thing to say something in public, it's another thing to actually implement it. Look at the way government works. When government says it is doing this, I tell you the real work will start maybe 2 weeks thereafter the announcement. So if they said the limit will remove the ceiling, and people go to withdraw, people go to deposit, and there's a limit or there's a sanction, then something is wrong somewhere. It's still for the CBN to look at that. If there, look, when you have a policy of this nature that is new, you're supposed to have a kind of a working guide, a committee that will oversee that working guide to ensure implementation without a let or hindrance. You have to have some people who must go around to ensure that this is done. You don't just sit down, cross your leg in an AC room with your tie and suit. You begin to just say, we have simply given this order. Who is implementing? We have to have some people who go around. If, for example, you had COVID-19, there were people who indeed were implementing some of these things.
Okay.
Are people obeying? If not,
talking about implementation, the lead story on the Daily Trust newspaper, Buhari chairs 14-man committee as fuel scarcity worsens. Being the Minister of Petroleum himself, he is heading that committee alongside other members, the DSS, Customs, the EFCC and others, and all that. This is even as black marketers, we call them, sell, petrol 500 naira per liter in Abuja and the rest of them. So what are your expectations?
Honestly, before my expectations, first my observations. You see, the president has so much on his table to govern Nigeria. That's one. He's all over the place. He's in Senegal. He's in this place. Fake to take charge of. And many other things.
And the campaigns are on as well.
The campaigns are on. So if I were to be the president, honestly, I would not, as Minister of Petroleum, become also the chair of ensuring that there is free flow of petrol supply or fuel supply in this country. I would not do it. Rather, I just look at somebody.
But he takes the blame.
Yeah, he takes the blame, appoint somebody who indeed will be running helter-skelter to ensure that he delivers. And once he gives that order, look, I'm appointing you because I know you are capable. Please do it to me Give me daily report. Come directly. These are my direct lines. I think that would be better. But again, when you say DSS is there, police are there, customs, immigrations, these are all civil servants who indeed will always go in line with what you call due process. You can't see this one unless you see that one. That one will move to another, and the other will move to another. And that is why people are selling this product at the prices they so wish. I mean, you go to some villages in the city here, it's a bit better. Go to villages, you see what they are suffering from these people. I mean, people now you just go and manage to buy 1 gallon and return home, begin to pray that it doesn't finish. It won't finish as soon as you don't use it, but as soon as you use it, it has to go. So we expect that okay, the committee you've set up, the DAC committee, who indeed would the president be the rallying point? Will he be the pivot in which everything rotates? He should appoint someone who indeed will be the arrowhead, who must move around. I mean, when FCT looked at the need to implement standards, they decided to appoint one journalist, and he's been all over the place. People see what he's doing. Now, if you feel that, okay, within customs, within immigration, there is an officer, there is somebody, a civil servant, who indeed can do the job. Look, all that it takes is that man going round. This goes beyond sitting at a round table or a four-corner table to provide solutions. You have to be a field officer to implement these things. Why is it that with all these committees, you see hawkers, they form an association. Once they say 10 liters is this, it's like there is an alternative government or an alternate government. We have to ensure that laws are meant to be obeyed. We have to know that we have officers who indeed must ensure laws are obeyed. They must be the implementers of these laws. Not that, okay, the president has set up a committee. Okay, that's the news. And thereafter what? When the DSS, some 3 weeks ago, went to say, look, we're going around, prices came down. And again, these marketers, is it that, okay, politics has come, let us blackmail a government in power to ease them out, or it's real that something is happening, it's caused by market forces? What really is the situation? And this is what this committee will look at. And again, how many? Is it the president that will go around? I think that within that committee, there has to be a subcommittee that must go around and ensure that, look, it does not matter whose cow is God. Ensure that Nigerians get this product that they ought to have and at the price so agreed by the Nigerian authorities.
Well, isn't this committee coming a bit late in the game? I mean, like, this is not the first time we're having fuel scarcity situation and, of course, the price issues and the rest of it. And this government is actually already on its way out. So why now?
Why now? It's always, let it be late than not taking action at all. I mean, take an action and maybe in the end people might clap. But if a Nigerian government would just sit down, fold its hands, go to bed, less than fair kind of, doesn't concern me, whatever is there is really not my issue. I'm the president, I'm the minister, let me just simply sleep. My salary is enough, my allowances are enough, my family, it's okay. But we're talking of the population of Nigeria, the general population of this country. If they feel long ago they ought to have done and they didn't do, now they feel they want to do, let's accept it rather than just say, no, it didn't happen long ago, so it shouldn't happen now. And that's why you can see experts are saying, yes, the government is running short of time. And yes, when you're running short of time, that's why in games generally, the 100 meters dash is always the last event to close the chapter. So if they feel this last dash will give Nigerians hope, let's have the dash with that hope.
All right, let's take a look at another story. This is about constitutional review. We are understanding that state assemblies have rejected financial autonomy for local governments, which some would say, well, I mean, one would expect that the states will be able to concur to this. I mean, this issue of state and local government joint account, which is one of the reasons have been identified as the reason why the local governments are not doing so well in terms of viability and the rest of them. So this is happening, and what's your take on this?
You see, the state governors are so powerful, so powerful. Now, name the state assemblies that have been able to have laws emanating from the members, the lawmakers. Many of these laws are coming via executive bills from the governors. Let any state assembly try anything funny with the state governor, and you see from the speaker and principal officers, there will be an engineering a kind of. First, you are impeached as an official. Next, something is stable within your constituency, within your ward. You are no longer needed. And, of course, your crisis starts. And so, for that reason, many of these lawmakers will simply just, toe the lines of His Excellency, the governor. And in doing so, at the detriment of the general society. Because tell me how you want to give me my money, you want to give me my right. I say, no, hold my rights on all my rights, hold them on my behalf. It's you that will determine when I'll breathe. It's you that will determine when I'll go out. And that is why they cannot function very well. And the same thing goes to the local government autonomy. You just realize that if these local governments were to have their own autonomy, have their own money, they'll be able, under the residual laws, they should handle markets.
Why is it so difficult to make this happen?
It's so difficult.
Why can't we perhaps have some other options of perhaps maybe an executive order that would make sure that this
happens? You see, an executive order was on board. The President Muhammadu Buhari actually signed an executive order. The governors ganged up. Today, see the way they are fighting against themselves. But when it came to local government autonomy and the need for them to have their money, they all came together. ABGA, APC, PDP, they all went to the Supreme Court as court of first instance. And of course, the Supreme Court ruled, say, President, you belong to the executive. You can't make a law and implement it. Go face your executive functions. And therefore, whatever you have done is a nullity. And so the governors join hands to defeat the president.
So the president doesn't have the powers to instruct the accountant general of the federation, for instance.
Honestly, he doesn't, because of this ruling. It's
directly
already a precedence. And he can't overrule the Supreme Court. Not even a magistrate's court, in as much as you'd never appealed. So the president cannot. He can't do it. So the governors have become so powerful.
Will we ever see local government autonomy in Nigeria?
We can get local government autonomy, we can get the state assembly autonomy on grounds that as campaigns are going on, let us ask these presidential candidates, will you, if you become president?
But apparently it's not up to them, from what it seems
Just a moment. If you make it a party affair, and you are the majority at the National Assembly, and again, you are governors, even at the governors forum, we now say, look, why don't we simply give this arm or tier of government?
Don't you think that would be risky for the political
It can't be risky because we're talking of
so
service.
that they don't lose their popularity.
No, popularity is all about you. If the governor, the local government chairman or councils are able to perform very well in your state, they've been able to nip insecurity at the primary level. Health-wise, they've done it at the basic level. Education-wise, primary school is so good. They'll have it less at the state level. And the federal government will also have it less. So which fear is it? That you carry Quran, carry Bible, and swear that you do justice to all manner of people. And in the end, where's that justice? That the president even said, look, when they come to Abuja, they said tiers of government have shared so trillions of money. Local governments got this, states got this, federal got this. Every state governor will always force the local governments, dump your money into this joint account. And the moment you dump that, they just say, take this and pay your salaries. And for you, take this for your visitors. And it ends there. And that's why even state governors who want to go and commission boreholes That's the job meant for local governments. I mean, state governors who want to go commission some feeder roads. That's the job of a local government. A state government who want to go commission some gutters here and there. That's the step of a local government. Clinics, they all belong to local government. And you also have some mini kind of forestries run by the local government. The market, why will a state governor go, I'm constructing so market? What, therefore, is the job of a local government? And that was why former President Olusegun Obasanjo said and described, maybe aptly, local governments. He said they have become sharing centers. The moment the salaries have been paid, just converge, collect yours, share yours, and disappear, wait for another. So what's the job of a local government? It is in the constitution, but it does not have the financial muscle, the financial independence. Same thing with the state assembly. What really do they have? I mean, the state governors have pocketed them. Let's see bills coming from the state assemblies. They are always executive bills, and the state governor will give you time. Look, a bill is coming, I want it passed within the next 3 days or this week. Yes, sir. His Excellency. So there are no checks and balances between the executive, the legislature at this point in the state level.
All right. Well, thank you so much for this perspectives. We will be looking forward to having you again on the show. Now, we'll take a short break, and then when we return, it will be top of the hour, where we'll look at the headlines again and other discussions on Daybreak. Join us again.
But in a situation where you find that a look like this,
not necessarily tribal or regional.
but I have said that.
TV, documenting the Nigerian story.
back, and if you're just joining us, this is Daybreak on Trust TV. It is top of the hour, 8 o'clock. I am Ibrahim Yusuf.
And I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you so much for joining us, and thanks for staying with us as well for those who've been watching us from an hour ago when we started the show. In case you're just joining, we've gone past so an hour on the show right now, taking a look at quite a lot of issues. But it's not too late for you. Let's take a look at the headlines again. Tinubu condoles with emirs of Kano, Bichi over demise of family matriarch.
And 2023, our people will work against you, Akpabio's local government chairman dares him.
How I was attacked in Katsina, Peter Obi.
Now to the details. All Progressive Congress presidential candidate Bola Ahmed Tinubu has condoled Emir of Kano, Aminu Ado Bayero, and Emir of Bichi, Nasir Ado Bayero, over the recent demise of family matriarch Fulani Hasia Bayero. Haja Fulani Hasia died on Tuesday, January 17th, 2023. In a statement on Tuesday, Abdulaziz, Special Assistant to the presidential candidate on media and publicity, said Fulani Hasia was a pious and affectionate woman who played critical roles in maintaining and sustaining the royal family ties. The APC candidate said Fulani will be greatly missed not only by family members and her relations, but by all who encountered her.
The chairman of Esian Udim local government area, Akwa Ibom State, Mr. Anthony Luke, has said that Godswill Akpabio will lose the senatorial election. The Supreme Court recently affirmed Akpabio as the rightful candidate for Akwa Ibom Northwest Senatorial District under the All Progressives Party and not retired DIG Udom Ekpo Udom. Akpabio, who hails from Esian Udim, was the former Senate Minority Leader and Niger Delta Minister before he resigned to contest as a presidential candidate. Luke claimed that apart from Akpabio's own community of Ukana, he has done nothing in other communities in Esian Udim to deserve the votes of the people in the coming election. Luke said that his people would remain grateful and committed to the People's Democratic Party because it was through the party that an Esian Udim son rose to an enviable position as governor and as minority leader.
And still talking politics, presidential candidate of the Labour Party, Mr. Peter Obi, has narrated how his campaign team was attacked in Katsina State. Obi's team, that has been on a state-to-state tour, touched down in Katsina on Monday. Daily Trust had reported how the presidential candidate wooed voters and promised to tackle insecurity if elected. In a statement issued on his behalf, Diron Onifade, head of media, Obi Deti Presidential Campaign Council, said that the attack on Obi and his campaign team is condemnable. According to him, the two incidents taken together make the team to suspect that attacks may have been premeditated at the behest of desperate politicians who had been deluding themselves with the false claim that they had the Northwest in their pockets, but are now shocked by the show of force of the obedient movement in the region. While commending the people of Katsina who came out en masse to support their campaign on Monday, he urged security agencies to investigate the attacks to forestall future occurrences.
All right, now let's take a look at some of the packages that we have this morning. Physically challenged persons, especially in communities where most residents are low-income earners, are ruining the harsh economic reality of the present-day Nigeria. Katsina is one of such states where most of its inhabitants are people living below the United Nations poverty line. Abdullahi Amadi takes a look at the lives of some physically challenged persons and how they struggle to make ends meet.
Tukur Lurwanu, a professional shoemaker and an NCE holder from Federal College of Education, Katsina, says most of their members are in abject poverty. Though Tukur admitted that a greater percentage of physically challenged persons in Katsina have received trainings on various skills, he says many are out of business because of high cost of materials. This, among many other factors, were attributed to the rampant collapse of businesses, including those of physically challenged persons who are worst affected. At the height of all these challenges, men of the underworld greeted Tukur's kiosk and stole his work tools.
Under my control, the people that are behind me in making shoes, those are physically challenged. I have at least 10 physically challenged people. But as you see me here, nobody is behind me, left and right, back and front. Why? Because of the expenses of life and the changes of life.
These physically challenged persons who are engaged in various businesses and handicrafts were forced to close down due to the high cost of materials and lack of capital. The effect of all this is that each of the physically challenged persons has at least 10 to 15 people under them, either learning the trade or supporting it. However, with the collapse of the business, their fate hangs in the balance. Before now, I was into tea and bread business, and I was doing very well. But unfortunately, after the coronavirus pandemic, coupled with the surging cost of materials, I was forced out of the business. I had about 4 people working under me, but right now, I'm struggling to feed myself.
da ɗan jarin da za su tsugunna wuri ɗaya. Wurin kasuwanci a hankali da yau a samu gobe a rasa.
I had a capital of close to 500,000 naira. Due to inflation, I'm now in packaged water business. All I had went down the drain. But we thank God all the same.
Ina karatu a ɗan zuwa harkar wasanni.
In spite of all this, there are still some physically challenged persons who are comfortable in their businesses, but not without challenges.
To, kasuwa ana yi kuma ana samun ci gaba bakin gwalgwadon iko.
For us, we are still able to get a little that can take care of our daily needs from this business. We can feed ourselves, pay school fees, service our tricycles, and assist others where necessary. However, we need more empowerment and better patronage.
Kayan aiki su ne sun yi tsada.
The physically challenged persons in Katsina are positive that their problems would drastically reduce if the government establishes a commission that will take care of them. Similarly, the appeals to northern leaders to champion a cause that will empower their members and help reduce street begging and other vices. Abdullahi Ismayamadi, Trust Television News, Katsina.
Now, over 30 people are feared dead following an outbreak of diphtheria in Kano State. Trust TV correspondent Idris Jibrin reports that affected victims are still mourning the death of their loved ones, while several others are still in the hospital.
Sanusi Shaibu in Ungogoloku government area of Kano State is mourning the death of his son 2 days after he's been infected. He says one other is currently in the hospital receiving treatment.
He started with a fever. I then took him to pharmacist. They gave him some drugs. Later we came back home and the fever still continued. So I took him to the hospital. After I went to the hospital, they advised me that I should take it to another hospital where they normally treat people with such kind of disease. So the very day I took him to that particular hospital, it was the day he died.
According to residents of this area, several other people have lost their lives in the last few days, and it appears the outbreak is spreading further despite efforts to contain it.
She started from being very lazy, later on with a fever. Then I took her to the hospital. They gave her some drugs. We came back, but we couldn't go back to the hospital because she could not eat. Blood started coming out from her mouth, and later she died. He woke up with a swollen neck, and then after I saw that, I took him to the hospital. They gave him some drugs, and then we came back home. We thought it was just a normal disease that we used to see in Hausaland. So we keep on doing traditional medicine up to the time he died. Then people started telling us that it was a different kind of disease called diphtheria.
Experts say children are more vulnerable to diphtheria But even adults who have not been properly vaccinated are also at risk of being infected.
Staying in an overcrowded location with people coughing, one is putting him or herself at risk. And the second thing is the issue of sanitation. Coming into contact with someone or maybe an object that has a deposit of the diphtheria bacterium. Without proper sanitation, hand hygiene, one will also be at risk. So, and then with the weather now, the season, you know, it's a very cold time. And then with that, people come down with a lot of flu. So the thing is, people shouldn't take it for granted.
At the moment, doctors say over 100 people have so far been infected in Kano, and that the number of death toll may likely increase in the next coming days. Idris Jibrin, Trust TV News, Kano.
All right, the Central Bank of Nigeria says the January 31st deadline for old Naira notes remains. The bank's Monetary Policy Committee meeting also raised interest rates by 100 basis points, taking it from 16.5% to 17.5%. The committee announced on Tuesday that the MPC cash reserve ratio was retained at 32.5%, while liquidity ratio remained 30%. Chamo Dabeng has more.
The first MPC meeting for 2023 had been highly anticipated, as many have been curious to see what move the CBN's MPC will make. Governor of the Apex Bank insists deadline for the withdrawal of old 1,500 and 200 Naira notes from circulation remains, despite calls from different quarters requesting for an extension.
I must say here that unfortunately I don't have good news for those who feel that we should shift the deadline. My apologies. The reason is because, just like the president had said on more than 2 occasions, and even to people privately, that for us 90 days, in fact, we feel it's 100 days is enough for anybody who has money or the old currency to deposit it, the money in the banks. And we took every measure to ensure that all the banks were open or remain still open to receive all old currencies.
The NPC meeting announced that the benchmark interest rate will be hiked by 100 basis points, taking it from 16.5% to 17.5%. CBN governor explains that the decision is in a bid to aggressively fight inflation. The decision to hike the interest rate comes despite a slight decrease in inflationary pressures, which he says is not enough to celebrate.
The economy remained confronted with the risk of high inflation, with adverse consequences on the general standard of living. Committee therefore decided to sustain the current stance of policy at this point in time to further rein in inflation aggressively. In summary, MPC voted to 1. Raise MPR to 17.5%, 2. Retain the asymmetric corridor at plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the corridor, and 3. Retain the CRR at 2.5%, and 4. Retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Several experts as well as international financial institutions have warned against developing nations using monetary tightenings to fight inflation, as it may further complicate life for its citizens. Chamun Dabeng, Trust TV News, Abuja.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives on Tuesday proposed a 6-month extension to stop the collection of old Naira notes and allow the redesigned Naira notes to fully come on stream. The House also set up a special committee to interface with CEOs of commercial banks to discuss challenges hindering the smooth takeoff of the new CBN policy. Let's take a look.
Controversies surrounding the introduction of the new Naira notes from inception have continued to haunt the new policy of the nation's apex bank. Following a motion on urgent public national importance brought by Representative Sada Soli, Nigerians are facing challenges in swapping the new Naira notes from commercial banks across the country. The lawmakers are therefore calling for the extension of the time frame, while advising that the insistence by CBN for 31st January 2023 could further ruin the nation's ailing economy.
I'm not being passionate. The CBN
It's a good policy. It's in tandem with global best practices. But world over, the currencies are not forced out of circulation. They are phased out of circulation. In this instance, in my own view, our currencies is being forced out circulation. And it is a known fact. The cashless policy and the currency swap for the new Naira notes have raised a lot of concerns to the growth of our economy.
The motion was supported by lawmakers who bemoaned the hardship faced by their various constituencies in swapping old notes for the new ones.
And we are all aware in the village, people do trading with 200 naira, 100 naira, 50 naira. So if you give somebody 1,000 naira, he can go and buy something, but there is no way he can get change because the only available currency is the old note of 100 naira, 50 naira, 200 naira, 500 naira.
From the First Amendment, because of the reasons CBN are used to, I would say that rather than 1 year, we'll reduce it to 6 months. That's my First Amendment. Let's move it back to 6 months. That we should gradually phase out in 6 months.
The Speaker called for an extension of the new currency policy by 6 months, while also advocating for an interface between the House and the CEOs of commercial banks to trash out challenges facing the new policy.
So we'll set up another committee under the leadership of the House leader to meet with the operators tomorrow and then subsequently with CBN.
In his ruling on the motion, the Speaker mandated the House Bankers Committee, which will be headed by the House Leader Alhassan Dogowa, to interface with the CEOs of the commercial banks and report back for further legislative action.
All right, thank you for staying with us. Now we'll take a short breather. When we return, we'll take a look at the next discussion. Join us again. All right, now we'll be talking about the interest rates raised by the Central Bank of Nigeria and the new policies of the Central Bank of Nigeria. We have joining us virtually a financial analyst, Mukhtar Mohammed, who joins us via Skype from Lagos. Thank you so much for joining us, Mukhtar.
Good morning.
Morning, and thank you for joining on Daybreak. Now, we've seen this decision by the central bank. Let's take your initial reaction first to this.
Well, I've said it before. I think it's a good policy. No good policy at the right time. When it's time, the policy takes off. Then I don't expect the central bank to say less than what they are saying, that they will not change their decision. They will not extend it. I mean, if you look at the time frame where they gave to Nigerians to return the money, and now you could say it's short. But again, how long does it take you to return an old Naira note to the bank if you're really sincere? What Nigerians, Nigerians like the fire brigade approach. They want to get there at the late hours to do what they ought to do. So for me, I think the CBN stance to remain. Again, like I said, it could cause a lot of destruction to the system if they change that, because we've seen that it has addressed the volatility, especially in the parallel market, where we saw the Naira exchange to the dollar going as high as almost 900. At the time this policy came up, we saw that there's been a reduction, and we are now doing between 720 to 750. And even the Bureau of Bureau de Change, the chairman of the Bureau de Change came up and said that the current stability we are seeing in the exchange rate in the parallel market has to do with the redesign of the new Naira note, which has made a lot of people that are keeping the old Naira note which were being used to change to dollar and kept at home for personal use because most of this money were gotten through criminal activities. So for me, I think the CBN has made up their decision, and I think it's good. Listen to the lawmakers also, which is okay for them to support their people. But again, we know that those that want to benefit more are the lawmakers, and that is why they are pushing for an extension. They've forgotten that the executive has its own responsibility, the legislature has its own responsibility. They don't have a way to stop the CBN governor from going on with this criticism, especially knowing the CBN Act, which makes it virtually independent for the CBN to come up with any monetary policy decision. And this is a monetary policy decision, so they need to respect the CBN Act.
The central bank talks about this cash swap. Isn't it reassuring enough for the legislators and the unbanked community? I mean, going by some of the concerns that have been raised.
I think it's not enough because this CBN also have not clothed themselves in glory. When you look at the time they used the Enlightenment, they didn't enlighten Nigeria enough. They're supposed to be partnership with the National Orientation Agency, which they did eventually. But I thought they should have done that earlier. Traditional ruler, town criers, especially for the rural area. And when we're looking at the rural area, we're looking at the rural area, especially in the far north. And also when you go to the riverine area in the south, and you also come to the interior of the north, of the southwest, these places have not been really covered by the CBN. And so, for me, I think that's where the CBN got it wrong. You know, if you're talking about cash swap, it will not favor the politicians. So, any policy that does not favor them because their own cash swap will come with Ghana must go. For when we are looking at cash swap, we're looking at those with 1,000, 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. We're not looking for those with about a million. Almost 200 million, 50 million, 10 million, 5 million. So definitely it's not working for them. I think the CBN have gotten them at a very tight corner, and I think they are trying to mingle their way out of it. But especially with the MPC meeting yesterday, and still insisting that the policy must go ahead.
Now, talking about the MPC meeting, the CBN governor actually said the increase in rates over the last few MPCs is actually reaping some dividends, as we saw a decline in inflation rates for December, even though the CBN governor says we shouldn't start dancing about that yet. But what's your general take on that?
You always say this in your subsequent your previous program about what the rate has been able to achieve, especially during the festivity period. And we're looking forward. We say there might be another increment in rate because of the result that we have seen. Definitely, those results were small, but you celebrate those marginal success. And again, it's becoming like a global best practice because almost the time the CBN was having those results, the Bank of the American Bank CBN governor also was talking about. They'll also be able to bring their inflation same also to the Bank of England. So definitely that shows with tightening, it is working. Remember now they are looking at inflation. If you listen to what happened in the World Economic Summit in Davos, Switzerland, it talks about challenge of the global economy. We have to do with inflation, and everybody should put their hands together, tighten up to tackle that problem. I think that's what the CBN is doing. So definitely they've achieved little. But those littles, they may have achieved more. But when you look at the time they were trying to achieve this, we had the fuel scarcity in farming communities, which would have reduced the price of household activities, household goods. So definitely that didn't make us see the kind of result that we expected to see. So I'm not surprised by the race hike. I expect that to happen in the first quarter. But by second quarter, I believe strongly that we'll start having a little bit of loosening of those tightening measures, and then we could take it from there. For me, I'm not surprised, and I think it's a good thing they are doing.
All right. So with the current tightening of the rates, I think it's something that we saw coming, just like you said, with the current trend as it is. So when will be the right time to loosen? Are we going to see it anytime soon?
Our own challenge is not just when we achieve those results in terms of inflationary pressures, maybe reduction. We also have a challenge of exchange rate volatility. So definitely when we loosen up and we still have those volatility in the exchange rate, especially because we have to import some of the product that we naturally used here. And also those manufacturing sector also have to import some parts for the machines that they work here. So we didn't seem to get this result because they have to source for funds from the parallel market at a higher exchange rate because the CBN is not able to meet all legitimate demands for FX from them. So for me, that is the greatest challenge. So the time we might begin to see those loosenings, yes, inflation will come down in the second quarter. I'm optimistic about that. Would we see those loosening immediately? We will not see those loosening immediately until we begin to see exchange rate volatility being addressed, whereby the exchange rate those easing. So it has a lot to do with Nigeria economy not dealing with inflation, not just inflationary project, but exchange rate volatility. So when we see a stable in the exchange rate volatility with that of inflation, then I think we could see easing.
Okay, looks like we've lost Mukhtar there, hoping to get him back to complete his thoughts on some of these issues raised. But apparently there's a lot of optimism coming out from him and by the central bank resolution, or say decision, to increase the interest rate. And we're also seeing that coupled with this new policy on the redesign of the Naira and everything put together, this is definitely going to have an impact, positive one on the economy.
It seems to be working with the reduction in inflation rate for December. Even though the central bank governor said we shouldn't start celebrating yet. I mean, like, this is just the beginning of things that we're seeing that are happening. Maybe this is the impact of all these policies that we've had over the past couple of MPCs. So I think it at least if we're seeing a positive movement, it's something to write home about and something to give us confidence going into the future. And just like Mukhtar said, I mean, we hope to see that in the second quarter, inflation rates still go down because of these policies that we currently have at the moment.
All right. Well, I understand that we have Mukhtar back again. Let's have him conclude on some of his points there earlier raised. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Sorry.
Okay, great.
So, like I was saying, I said we might not be able to see that immediately, even if we see those numbers comes down in terms of inflationary pressures. We'll also couple with the exchange rate volatility. So until we begin to get supply, especially we begin to earn more from the effect into our economy, even what we gain in exchange rate, inflationary pressure will lose in terms of volatility in the exchange rate, especially when the CBN is not able to meet some of the demand, especially for the manufacturing sector, and because they don't have so much influence. And then the NNPCs happen to be the cash cow of the Nigeria economy, that both our foreign reserve also are struggling with remitting anything to the federation account because of the high subsidy burden they say they are taking about. So definitely we will not see any good news anytime soon until the second quarter. But even if with that, again, it all still depends again on if we are able to maintain stability in the exchange rate, especially in the area of supply.
All right. Well, I would like to just take us back a bit to talk about the new currency now, the new notes, and this the new interest rates of the Central Bank of Nigeria. How can we guarantee that people in rural areas, that is in the informal economy, do not lose their money as a result of this new currency issue that we are having? How can we make sure that that doesn't happen?
Unfortunately, I think it will happen, but we'll need to reduce the percentage of what will happen because they've not been enlightened more. Senator Doma said. He said even in his own locality, him as a senator have not even seen the new note, talk less of his own locality, especially in locality whereby we are battling a lot of security challenge, where banditry and kidnapping and also terrorists are reigning in those areas. It will be difficult for them to change those notes. And not only because it's difficult for them to change the note, going out to change the note, or CBN coming there to swap from the old note to the new note. But aside of that, I think with the swap deal for them to go in there and return their money, and also maybe the CBN may have to come with a little bit of palliative or short measures for the rural area, because we've not done well for them, because we've not really reached out to those in the rural area. In the urban area, they have no excuse not to have returned those notes, but in the rural area, I think it's a very big challenge. I think the CBN should look at it again. The POS terminals are there. They say they have the money agents are there. And also they also say they will be sending the CBN team to go to these areas. So I think they should be able to do those things on time, because as it stands now, we have just a little, about 5 days to the end of this bringing back the old notes and taking the new ones. So definitely, I think it's a big challenge. It's a very big challenge.
Okay, Mukhtar, you know, the central bank has repeatedly said that they have, you know, disbursed these new currencies to the commercial banks, and they have exonerated themselves several times. Who is to be blamed for this? Where should we be looking? Is it the commercial banks or is it the central bank? Is the central bank not giving enough new currencies to the banks? Is that why we are not seeing as much, you know, distribution of the new currencies? Or is it the banks that are hoarding the money?
I think the blame should go to the central bank. You are the regulators. They cannot be the bank. Commercial banks can never be bigger than you. And remember that it's the CBN that have been saying that we have enough notes in circulation. We've not heard anything from the commercial bank, and you don't expect to hear anything from them, because they will not want to fight their regulators. But from every available thing we are saying, it's like the notes, maybe they have issues that have to do with distribution. If you have printed about 500 million of those notes, according to the Deputy Governor of the CBN, that is Aisha Ahmed, when he appeared in the Senate, then we should have enough of those notes to go out. And also they said that ATM terminals should still be dispensing new note. Up to this moment, they are still having the old note until yesterday. For some ATM terminals, you go there, they dispense the new note, but it's just the 1,000. Nobody, I've not seen the 500 or the 200, how it looks like. So definitely, I think, and what the CBN made us to believe was that the 200 would be the only notes on the ATM machines. And so, for me, I still blame the CBN. It's either they hide, they're not telling us something. They have coming out now to say any bank that does not accept the new note. And so I wonder if banks themselves are not accepting the new note, how do you expect the ordinary Nigerian in the street to accept the new note? So that, for me, is a CBN problem, like I said, in terms of
a situation where you have people losing their money as a result of this policy or redesign of the new Naira notes, definitely will have consequences, isn't it? What do you foresee?
It's the consequences that you lose your money, then we are getting more Nigerians into the poverty level, because most of these people are in the informal sector. They struggle to get those money themselves. It's not like it's handout or palliative from government. So if they are losing their money, that means also it's not good. For us, we get a lot of Nigerians back into the poverty level, especially when you lose such money and you're not able to take care of yourself. And I am more particular about those in the rural area. So we'll get more people in the rural area going to the poverty level. For me, that is the biggest implication if they are not able to exchange their old note for the new notes.
Now, with this currency redesign and the deadline actually looming, And just like you said, a lot of people might actually end up losing monies that they have and they are not able to exchange those monies. And we're still complaining right now that the new currency is really not in circulation that much, which means it's affecting the general amount of money that's in circulation in the economy. What effect will that have on the inflation rate?
Yeah, that's one of the tools to control inflation, and that's what the CBN is. So I'm not surprised that you're not seeing so much of currency in circulation. And that's why when you want to see currency, you see the lower denomination. The CBN also using that to fight inflation, and also they are trying also to reduce the cost in terms of printing of the of naira notes. So that's why they are making sure that all of us go to the digital platform. So one of the tools to control inflation is the reduction in liquidity in the system. And I think also with this, that's why I say the new naira note also help in reducing that, especially those that have the old naira note, taking it to the banking space again. So that has been one tool that they may have used to control inflation. And that's why we see those marginal results we are seeing. If you look at the famines, the test of food as food items were still high, especially because of the flood. But when you look at the general inflationary pressure, you realize that it came down because CBN was able to reduce most currency in circulation, because most of the old notes that were outside the banking space, about 1.5 trillion were brought into the banking space. And you don't expect CBN to print another 1.5 trillion. So definitely, I think that's a tool that has helped them fight inflation. So one of those beauty about the redesign of the naira note, especially in our own case, will be that a lot of old currency will find themselves into the banking space, and then they will use that to control inflation. And so definitely that is the positive in this new naira note exchange in the area of control of inflation.
All right, well, maybe you should just explain to us the channel of distribution here. We have the printing and minting, that is definitely responsible for the printing of this new cash. The central bank said that they are not going abroad to, print this money. They are doing that locally and all that for the first time. Is there a question about the capability of the local printing and minting?
I think there should be a question, because if we are not getting it, and the CBN is saying we are having enough, then we are not getting it. Like I said, it maybe have to be with the supply chain. So they need to rejig that supply chain to make sure that it gets to every part of Nigeria. And then, the challenge is that, like I said, these funds also are going to be moved from one part of the country to another. And that in terms of logistic challenges, this will not be done by going by road because of the security challenges. This is going to be done by air. And you know that almost not all Nigerian states also have airports whereby you can land. So definitely sometimes you have to land in another state. I think for me, it has to do with not them not being able to print, but it has to do with that distribution challenge. And I think that's what I think they should work on. Unfortunately, the security and printing mill is only in Abuja. It's not even in Lagos. It's not even so that's why we're talking about sometimes you need to decentralize these things. If we have in the Northwest, we have the North Center. So definitely the printing mill in the Northwest will be able to meet up with those demands. But when you have only one, and then they print and they give to the CBN in turn now will begin to take it to the various states. The various states will not take it to the various banks. The various bank will not take it to their various branches. So you see there's a lot so that has to do with the supply chain. For me, that's a major problem.
It's a very massive exercise. In fact, if you may, almost similar to an election, a general election in this case, because if you look at the logistical, needs that will be involved in the distribution of this new currency, it's not as simple as just, okay, we've changed the new currency, the banks come and take it. I mean, it goes beyond that, isn't it?
It goes beyond that. It goes beyond that. And especially you need to do quality assurance also. Remember that they need to look at the security features, everything. So it goes beyond that. So definitely it goes way beyond that. That is why a lot of people are saying that the CBN did not put their house in order before they come up with this policy. Maybe they thought Nigerians would generally respond, but that would be a mistake on their part, because I can assure you that from next week, Monday and Tuesday, you see the kind of crowd you've never seen in the banking space. All of them going to return their naira note, because Nigeria always believe that we have time only the 11th hours. They want to take it there, and they believe that the CBN must give them an extension, because I've spoken to one or two people. All they are waiting for is that there must be an extension. CBN will have no option but to extend. And I think with the CBN governor saying what he said yesterday, I think it's a game changer. And a lot of people, as I'm reading the paper, are beginning to take their old notes to the bank. And so that's the challenge. We don't need to be forced to bring those notes when it's time to bring those notes. So definitely, we also have our peculiar problem. But like you said, the distribution part of it also is a very major problem.
Dr. Mohammed, thank you very much for joining us on Daybreak today and offering those perspectives on the Nigerian economy. Thank you very much.
A pleasure. Thank you. And have a nice day.
All right. Well, it's still Daybreak on Trust TV. We'll take a short break right now, and when we return, the conversation continues. Just stay with us. Welcome back, and thanks for staying with us on Daybreak right here on Trust TV. Now, something interesting is happening. 4 eminent Nigerians will on Thursday in Abuja evaluate the areas that the top contenders for the presidency in the 2023 general elections have so far listed as their priorities, and of course propose what they feel the next president of Nigeria should focus on to positively transform the country. Now, the annual Daily Trust Dialogue is part of the Media Trust Limited's contributions to stimulating discussions by Nigerians and fellow Africans towards enhancing national and indeed African integration and cohesion, which are also crucial for the sustainable socio-political growth and economic development of Nigeria and the African continent at large. Now, since 2002, Media Trust has hosted the annual public lecture series to discuss topical issues on various aspects of governance. Now, the series of dialogues had been attended by past heads of government, the leadership of the National Assembly, as well as captains of commerce and industry, aside members of the diplomatic corps. Now, this year's edition has the theme interrogating the 2023 presidential agenda. And we have in the studio Media Trust Group Director Manir Ali in the studio right here with us to preview the dialogue scheduled for tomorrow. Good morning and welcome to Daybreak.
Good morning.
All right. So the Daily Trust Dialogue coming up tomorrow, and it's going to be, the theme is talking about the presidential 2023 presidential agenda. How important is this dialogue coming at this moment?
Well, usually the way it works is that as soon as the last edition of the dialogue happens, we start planning for the next one. And when we were planning for this particular one, we thought that the election is crucial for the year. And so you have to plan something around it. Initially, it was to invite the presidential candidate, but we saw how busy they were and also how they keep turning down invitations to appear at different forums. They are selecting, picking and choosing where they go. So that is why we said, why don't we have a panel that interrogates all that they've been saying, all the claims that they've been dishing out to Nigeria, we'll do this, we'll do that. You remember there's the fabled example of a politician going to some village that he will put up a pump that will be dishing out furada nono exactly. out of it. So there is that season. It's the season when politicians make all sorts of promises. So our own job, we thought, is to interrogate, ask questions. Do all the claims add up, and how possible? Where are they going to get the resources to be able to execute this? So that is why you have this panelist who will now look at the different aspects of what the different candidates, especially the major ones, have been making.
Certainly this is not the first, it's not the second of the Daily Trust Dialogue. It's the 20th edition that we've seen, and this will not be the first time that the dialogue will be engaging in such discussions, especially as it relates to elections and the rest of them. Do you find anything strikingly different from previous ones that we've had and this particular one at this moment?
Well, in a way you will say it's more of a continuum. It's more of a continuation of the theme, because you find that there are some key elements. It's either about democracy, the different aspect of it, whether it's the politicians' contest for election, the conduct of the election itself, or issues to do with the economy, or issues to do with security. I just looked at the different topics we've had over the last nearly 20 years, and I saw that the theme were always related. Even when we invited the late Ghanaian leader, Flight Lieutenant Jerry Rawlings, to come to Nigeria, it was about democracy in Africa. We also invited the daughter of the first post-independent Ghanaian leader, that is Nkrumah, Samia Nkrumah, who was then a member of the Ghanaian parliament. It's still about elections, about democracy. Mo Ibrahim, who came, that's one of the richest Africans who was in the business of telecoms. It was still about how will Africa claim its place in the place of other nations. And when we had both Maurice Iwu, that is the former chairman of the Independent Electoral Commission, and also at another time, Professor Atahiru Jega, it's about the same thing. We have had Nuhu Ribadu, when he was the EFCC chairman, same kind of thing. There was the interesting year when we had Peter Obi, Aminu Bello Masari then was speaker. Peter Obi was the governor of his own state of Anambra, and there was a third person who was also much in the political limelight. So it was about, largely it's been about the economy, democracy, security.
In terms of the dynamics, however, of the Nigeria's politics and democracy between then and now, are there certain changes that that you are probably going to be looking at as well?
I think one of the concerns is the desperation that seems to be creeping in among the contestants, that it is my turn kind of mentality, which means nobody else maybe should aspire, or nobody else must get it. And then you also have the narrative of some of the contestants or their supporters who are busy drumming up the kind of narrative that Trump had. I either win or the election isn't right. If I don't win, it means the election was fraudulent. So those kind of narratives are quite worrying. We are hoping that the panelists will be able to adequately interrogate these issues and also suggest the best way to get out of this particular election cycle.
All right, and looking at the panelists, the constitution of the panel has it seems that there's a widespread across when it comes to experiences. We have political scientists, we have somebody who has been in the economy, as former chairman of a bank, and all that, and private sector captains. What informed your decision to have this particular panel at this moment in time? One would think that since it's a political season, it's election year, it will be jam-packed with politicians.
Yes, well, actually, the way it will work is that at the beginning, there will be clips, about 5-minute clips of each of the 4 main contestants. That is Atiku Abubakar, Bola Tinubu, Peter Obi, Rabiu Kwankwaso. So they will all espouse, what seems to be like the condensed version of their manifesto, what they want to do. And then this panelists, as you did say, quite varied, like Professor Jibo Ibrahim, who incidentally had featured earlier. He was one of the panelists maybe about 10 years ago, who will now be interrogating some of the things, especially from his experience as a political scientist, as a well-known columnist who has always been worried about the trend of politics in Nigeria, the way it is getting even more desperate. Then you have somebody from the Lagos Business School who will look at it from the business, from the theoretical and all of that. You have Eugene Enahoro, incidentally, who comes from a family of politicians. His father was a minister in the First Republic, and in his own right, he's also a political scientist and what have you. So he will be doing his own bit. And then you have Mrs. Ibukun Awoshika, who was an accomplished administrator, businesswoman, until lately the chair of one of the big banks in Nigeria. So you have people who will see things from all these different perspectives and try to offer it to the audience.
So in terms of participation now, who should be attending this event?
It's an open event. Everybody is welcome to come. We've gone out to invite people from different strata of the society, but as I did say, it's an open event. We took the trouble of even inviting younger people, like from the universities around Abuja, so they could come and begin to see up close what all these promises by politicians are from the perspective of people who may have dealt with them several election cycles over. Because mind you, a lot of the young people will be voting for the first time, and some of them, they just take things on their face value. So these experienced people will be able to help them understand what the issues are and what the right questions ought to be to these politicians before you make your own decision on whatever it is that you want to vote for.
So before we go, let's look at the series in its entirety, not just the one in particular. We've been, just like we mentioned earlier, we've seen like this is like the 20th that we're talking about, so it's been going on for a very long time. Definitely, you must be doing something right to be doing it over and over again. What can you say has been the major impact of these series that we've been having for all this while?
I think the major contribution it may have had is on policy and public discourse within the country. It's trying to help to elevate the level of discussion so that it's not about maybe sectionalism, about religious matters, about a lot of the surface things that we tend to waste a lot of energy on, because we bring quality audience in addition to the quality panelists and speakers. And then it's been the venue where some of the most earth-shaking announcements have been made. I remember that former President Olusegun Obasanjo made a very big, he raised, he is the kind of person who sucks the limelight. And when he came, even though he wasn't a panelist, he was the chair, but he raised a question that reverberated around the country. It was when late President Yar'Adua was on the chair of the president and he was sick, and President Obasanjo, of course, you'll know what he will do. He asked the question that if it were him or anybody with sense of responsibility, he wouldn't want to continue being president because he will be dragging the country back. And there've been quite a number. Even Morris, you remember he was the one who did what was being referred pejoratively as the Wuru election. So he was reluctant to come because he was wondering, are these guys laying an ambush for me? But we managed to convince him to come, and when he did come, he gave his own version of things and what have you, and we thought that it helped to elevate the conversation, especially because you heard from the main guy who was in charge of that particular election cycle. When Winnie Mandela, the late wife of late Nelson Mandela, also came, she spoke about politics. She spoke alongside Najatu Mohammed, who currently is in the news again for quitting one party for another. So they were there, and that was when Samia, that's the daughter of Nkrumah, paired up with them. So the three of them were the panelists in that particular edition of the dialogue. And we feel that at least we're helping to begin something, some honest discussion about the country, some alternative views about the way things could be, other than maybe just the version of the sitting government or the current set of politicians.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Director, Media Trust Group, Malam Manir Dang Ali, joining us to shed light on the Daily Trust Dialogue, which is coming up tomorrow, the 20th. Like you heard from him, it's open to everyone. If you are available, you can join. And it's going to be live streamed as well on Trust TV, as well as our YouTube channel, and also across other social media platforms of Trust TV and the Daily Trust. So you'll be doing yourself good to join the conversation. That's where we end the show. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you, Ayuba.
All right. That's where we end the show for today. Join us again tomorrow for on the morning show. I am Ayuba Ilya.
Well, thank you for being part of the conversation on Daybreak right here on Trust TV. Why don't we do this all again tomorrow? I am Ibrahim Yusuf.